And I want to welcome everybody. Boa tarde, todo mundo. Bem-vindos. Pessoas estão chegando, mas eu já vou aos poucos começar a falar algumas coisas.
Welcome, people are arriving, but I'm going to start speaking, telling you some things. We are recording this meeting this afternoon with the intention of posting it afterwards on YouTube. And I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Astrid Kusser. I work at Good Institute. I'm here together with Renata Leite, my colleague at the Good Institute. She works in the cultural programmation. I'm one of the initiators of the project Cidade Floresta. I've been producing together with Ale from Jurubeba, that is also here with us, the second year that we are together on this project. And today we are going to receive Klaas Koutenbrouwe. I hope.
Actually pretty good. Yeah.
Bavarian accent in German helping, and we will hear Klaas on the Zoöp model, an organizational model that can help us to think processes of decision making from more than human standpoints. Before we jump into this, I would like to pass on. Eu acho que eu vou fazer isso em português. Eu vou principalmente falar português.
I think I'm going to mainly speak in Portuguese, even with Klaas. So I'm going to pass some instructions of Zoom. So the ones that would like to listen to everything in Portuguese, please change below in the bottom bar. You change in the icon interpretation and choose Portuguese. The ones that would like to listen to everything in English, change to English. And the ones who speak both languages, just leave on the original. Okay? So this is the instructions to access the simultaneous translation. We are going to have Isa and Armenia today that is going to do this work for us today. So this is a small globe on the bottom. Do you have any doubts? Is everything okay? I know people are still arriving. And then I will ask people to put their doubts in the chat. But I think that everything is fine right now. Then I'd like to invite you all at this initial moment to write in the chat your name, where are you, where you're speaking from, and your interest in the subject. And also this way we can take a look to see who is here with us, and it can also help us in the discussion afterwards. We are not going to have time to have an introduction round, but we are going to have 1 hour for the discussion to enter in more practical issues that really move us here in Brazil. So I'm going to introduce what's the program of Cidade Floresta that made possible for us to invite Klaas this afternoon. Cidade Floresta is a speculative program that we have been developing. This is the 3rd year, and we want to imagine a future for the urban life from the perspective of the plants. So one of the provocative question is how the city can learn from the forest. How can we organize a city that no longer organizes itself as if it were a factory, a company? And how would it be if the city organized itself as a forest? What kind of relationship would be possible from this perspective? And also from based on the knowledge that we have been learning together with the biologists, together with the archaeologists, but also together with the original and native people that have always lived with and from the forest. So it's also a provocation for this famous concept of the right to the city that in Brazil is in the Constitution. So this week's another dramatic one regarding a decision, a very important decision for the future of Brazil and maybe for the planet, that is called the temporal mark, that discusses who has the right of the forest, the right to the forest. So I think that this discussion has been reassumed in the Superior Federal Court, and it's really dramatic. At the same moment, the Metabolic Museum, we held a seminar. It was in June, and this was in the agenda of the Parliament. We imagine that we all are connected to this dramatic situation, and today we have the possibility to talk to someone on the other side of the ocean, of the Atlantic, that is speaking from another place, from another reality, but we think that he has something to share with us that I'd like to introduce to you. His class, he has studied history in Utrecht University. It's been 20 years that he is been teaching media theory in the schools of art. He focuses in the intersection between different knowledge practices like technological, artistic, legal, and non-human. In this context, in 2019, he has started this project, Zoöp, with the idea sorry, because we have been receiving more people here. So, of an organization in which the humans and non-humans can cooperate in the operational sphere, working towards an ecological regeneration and towards the emergence of a regenerative economy. So, to learn more and understand a little bit better this model, I'd like to pass the floor to Klaas, that is going to speak for 45 minutes. And then afterwards, we're going to have time for the questions and answers and our comments and debate. And also to know each other better. So, Klaas, the floor is yours.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for introducing me. I think the subtitles are actually not really translating. They can only transcribe. So I'm afraid Portuguese spoken questions will have to be translated live before I can understand them. So now it's actually trying to do its best of transcribing me in Portuguese, which probably does not make sense at all. And this,
no, it's not a transcription. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much for being here. Excuse my slightly hoarse voice. I'm recovering from COVID, but doing pretty well. So don't worry about me. But I hope I can be that you can hear me well. I will try to speak slowly and clearly. But please, if I go too fast, just raise your hand, and if something is unclear, please ask me. I will now share my screen. I have a presentation. Is this presentation, are you seeing the video, the picture?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to say that nearly all of the images I use in my presentation are made by photographer Patricia de Ruiter. And I use her images for 3 distinct reasons that all have a lot to do with what I'm talking about.
Just a question, Klaas. You want us to see 3 slides, is that it? Or you
No,
would
just one.
rather... okay,
This is-
so this is the feedback I want to give you, that we can see the 3 ones. We see the next slide, and
sorry.
and there is something with maybe for notes or something. So maybe you want to change that?
Yeah. Oh.
And now it's yes, perfect. That's it.
Okay. I had a second screen connected, and it makes it. Well, anyway, it's fine. So the pictures I'm using are by photographer Patricia de Ruiter, and I use her images with her consent. Of course, we made this agreement for 3 reasons. One of them is that mostly the perspectives she chooses are not necessarily default human eye height, but are perspectives that can come from other bodies. So you look at things from different angles. The second reason is that in her images, this one is not the most clear in that respect, but most others are. There's no real separation between foreground and background. Everything's always connected. There's not real a center object that is kind of depicted against something that is not the main topic of the image. Everything is always connected. And the third reason is that she does not make any distinction, and this is that she does not make any distinction in her pictures between what you could call human artifacts and things that are not made by humans. So you might recognize her images as nature photography, but she's never kind of puristic in this sense. Anything that is present as body in a picture is always present equally. There's no distinction between what you could call nature on the one side and the human world on the other side, which is often the case if you look at what is known as nature photography. I'm not sure if this distinction is very relevant from the perspective of Brazil, but in Europe, this is quite a consideration. But I'll get more into that, and I hope it gets clear why these 3 distinctions, these 3 characteristics are relevant for the Zoöp project. So I'm here to talk about Zoöp. This introduction, I think, is not necessary, but it helps to set the stage. We know things are really not going well. I think at this moment still South America, the whole continent is suffering from a major heat wave. We have fires all over the world, rainstorms, hail in the middle of the winter, etc. We're in the midst of an increasingly severe climate crisis. The reason for this crisis, if you go back, is the way our economic system is constructed. Somehow this economic system works on this fundamental separation between what humans are entitled to do, and the rest of the world of non-humans, which is the world that can be pulled apart and used and where stuff can be dumped in. So there seems to be in the worldview that's underpinning the logic of our economy, in that worldview, there is a separation between the world of nature, the world of the non-humans, and the world of the humans. And actually, of course, this economy does not serve humans. It only serves a very limited group of humans. I guess this is obvious. The nature of the crisis can be described as, at this moment, the life carrying capacity of the planet is diminishing. As James Lovelock in the Gaia theory, in the Gaia hypothesis, which is in a way proven, although not everybody likes the word Gaia, described, is that life creates the circumstances for more life. Life organizes the planet so that more life can find a home in there. And this is an increasingly complex and enriching process. At this moment, this process is in the reverse. Of course, humans cannot kill life on the planet, but we can make the world uninhabitable for humans. This is not that hard. as we all know, all bodies that live participate in ecosystems, and all bodies that live also need each other to live in those ecosystems. So if at this moment the life carrying capacity of the planet is diminishing, we'll have to find a way to reverse this process. So basically, to learn to contribute to ecological regeneration, to increase the life carrying capacity of the planet. And for this, we need to make a change in this economic logic, which is the main cause of this ecological degradation. And this, of course, is not easy. This is a major, fundamental, profound task that is beyond anybody or any organization. But we have to find a way to start with it. So this is the same story, but then kind of in a, you could say, in crude diagrams. And these diagrams are actually cosmograms. They depict a worldview, a way people see how the cosmos works. So this picture describes the worldview of the default, the normal, if you want, the normal economic actor that understands that basically the world works according to the logic of economy. Economy is the main concern. You will realize I'm very much talking from a European/Western perspective. I realize very much that in Brazil, there are very different cosmologies at play, but in the dominant systems, the dominant economic systems, we just had Bolsonaro. Well, I don't have to tell you anything about that. Who clearly works from this from this worldview. So in this worldview, economy is the basic way in which the world works, and ecology is a subset of relations inside of economy, which is there to be used literally. So in order to make a change, we would first have to realign this cosmogram so that we can begin a conversation. So this is the move. Basically, economic actors should learn to understand that basically the world functions according to the logics, the pluriverse, multiple logics of ecology, and that economy is a small subset of relations in the middle of that. And at this moment, it's a highly problematic set of relations that, as we already said, eats away this logic of ecology. But at least this gives us the basis to come to a better understanding. And then this is the cosmogram that Zoöp adheres to. And it's not a description of the world as it is, but a depiction of the world as it could be, as it we hopefully can become at some point. So this is a world in which this logic of economy is no longer opposed to that of ecology, but these are actually aligned. So what we talk about then is not a world in which there's a clear distinction between what is an economy and what is ecology. These become the same thing. So in other words, we talk about an ecology that sustains all life. You could call this a regenerative economy. You can also call it a human inclusive ecosystem. And in order to avoid, or in order to make clear that we mean something that does not exist yet, we came up with this word zoonomy. So an economy that sustains all life, all zoe. You'll hear that word come back every now and then, and now you know what I mean. So this is a kind of again schematic description of three, you could say, current ways to look at economy. And in other way, this is another way to describe the problem that I described, but now it has a little bit more nuance. And the important distinction in my understanding is here between the second and the third option. It's not here. We thought it was here, or many people thought it was here, but I think it is here, and I'll try to explain. So the left column, the degenerative column, describes capitalism as it is, in its crude form. The capitalism as it unfolded in the 20th century. It is net negative. It eats away the living world. It contributes to CO2 and other greenhouse gases, etc. It's aimed at short-term profit. It is the business as usual. Nothing changes in this degenerative economy. It works from an understanding that competition is the nature of the game. We need to compete for scarce resources, and we need to win. That means that others have to lose. It reluctantly abides to laws and regulations. It prefers the absence of laws and regulations and the free market. It sees the organization as an optimizable machine in which the parts don't matter, and the whole is more important and more powerful than the smaller scales. It pits nature against culture, and it is capitalism as we know it, and as it has particularly strongly unfolded since the 80s of the previous century, the neoliberal capitalism. So in narrative, a difference is made in the second column. And then this is the aims of a lot of the major economic partners to strive towards what is known as sustainability. The question I'd like to ask is, what is actually the goal of this? What are we trying to sustain here? And my point is that we're mostly trying to sustain something which should not be sustained. So the sustainable logic aims at net zero, so to not do any harm anymore, but still it understands itself as separate from the ecological, from the living world. The economy is not the place where the living world happens. These are different worlds. It is aimed at prolonging the existence, I would say, of capitalism as it mostly is. So it's aimed at the midterm, to live a little bit longer than the way things are going right now. It is aiming at not doing anything good necessarily, but just at doing less harm. So we're still doing toxic things, but we're just doing them more slowly. It works from a logic of collaboration, which is clearly more sustainable and more enjoyable than hard-on competition. But it also works from the idea of the free choice, of the liberal individual that has an autonomous free choice. And I'll get to the distinction in the next column. It works with the eco-social development goals, and it can work with corporate social responsibility, all ways which are not kind of the core processes of the organization, but things to tack on to an organization that makes it do less harm and makes it do a little bit, to be a little bit less toxic. It sees the organization, you could say, as family, and in a family, it's also all right if you don't always feel good. So we're not there to kick you out. Every broken part is immediately replaced, but still, it's us against them. It's our family, not their family. It puts not nature against culture, but it puts it next to it. They're not the same world. And it is still capitalism, but then softened. So I think the distinction is here. And what Zoöp tries to do is to contribute, and this is the column that describes the aims of this third image, the image in which economy and ecology are no longer separate entities. It's the aim towards a net positive way of existing. That means that through your actions as organization or as economic actor, you actually contribute to the life-carrying capacity. You not only do less harm, but you actually create more habitable planet. If you would be able to do this, this is of course not something that is short-term or mid-term. This can go on forever. You've cracked that problem. You are no longer, again, this is largely a theoretical or speculative notion, not entirely. We also go into that. But if you made this notion a reality, then there's no reason to stop. You don't have to be worried about, but can we go on like this? No, you can go on forever like that. So it's aiming at restoration, at regeneration. Again, with regeneration, literally it means to bring back to life. A regenerative economy is an economy that contributes to the life-carrying capacity of the planet. It works from the idea of complete interdependency, this idea that in ecologies, all bodies actually need each other to thrive, either as food or as habitat or as conditions for procreation or etc., etc., etc. It aims way beyond the social development goals. The social development goals still aim at economic growth, whereas a regenerative economy, for that economic growth is not necessarily the main aim. It's the growth of the life-carrying capacity of the planet. This is what the aim is. It sees the organization as living system, as basically a functioning part of a larger ecosystem. It no longer depicts culture versus nature. It sees culture as culture, as in, the word nature is one of those Western terms that caused a lot of problems. That made, it's the thing that is opposed the other place versus the human world. It's the place where non-humans live. It's the place that we are no longer part of. We also don't want to be food anymore. Humans don't want to. They stepped out of ecology by no longer accepting the fact that humans can also be food. In a way, that's the fundamental reality of being part of an ecosystem, is that you're also food, that you're and that you also provide habitat. And these are things that humans refuse to do. They only make. They are willing to provide habitat for their own species, and they refuse to be food. We're no longer part of eco. So nature kind of encloses this idea. So in fact, nature also is opaque. Is one. I mean, as a concept, it's like the same everywhere. Nature is also nature if it's in South America, in Europe, or in the Arctics or wherever. It's always nature. So it kind of denies diversity, denies difference, denies the specificity of different species living together in particular ways in particular places. In a way, it denies the fact that ecologies are also cultures. It denies the fact that diversity is the rule, whether it's for human or more than human or combined communities. So in a regenerative economy, we don't do the difference between nature and culture anymore. And we understand that all sites, all spaces are sites of particular multi-species communities to which humans can or cannot be, of which humans can be part or not, or maybe they're not. Both are natures and both are cultures. And economically, in the larger picture, it is not aimed at economic growth, but it's aimed at what is known as degrowth. So planned deconstruction of the economy. And it's about decoupling economic activity from the need to grow. This is a little bit beyond my scope of this presentation. If you want to, we can talk a bit more about it, but I'll leave it for now. Okay, so Zoöp tries to provide an inroad, a little starting point, a way to get started, to get your head and to get your practice around the possibility of contributing to this regenerative economy, to transform your activities, your economic activities in such a way that step by step, gradually, process by process, they change from your current, probably mostly degenerative or at best neutral kinds of activities, and to transform them into regenerative ways of operation, to provide a step-by-step process by which your organization can transform. So the word Zoöp is the combination of cooperation, collaboration, the organization model of the cooperation with Zoe. And Zoe is the Greek word for life in general. It's an organization model that allows for collaboration with humans and other than human life. And it makes the interests of other than human life part of the organizational decision making. I'll get into that, how that works. Any organization can become a Zoöp, if provided that you want to make ecological regeneration part of your core processes. And very important is that Zoöps share. So they're in a learning process and they share the knowledge of what they learn, and thereby they help each other by taking this road. I'll get into that as well. This I don't need to do. So in short, it's an organization model. It is essentially an organization model that sets up for a learning process. The organization model needs the learning process, and the learning model process leads the organization model. And if if you adopt it, this is also a basis for collaboration of your organization with others. So it's the basis of a movement. So the same story I just told, these cosmograms, but now on the level of the organization, the default economic actor. So this again would be the way, the worldview, or the self-description of a regular company that understands that there is such a thing as ecology, that probably even need it, but basically it's a question mark. What should it be? It's not us, it's somewhere else. It's a bit like that's nature, that's over there, and we can use it, and we are here and we make our own decisions. So the moment an organization becomes ripe to think about becoming a Zoöp, or to begin to think about the regenerative economy, the possibility of working on it, can be described as this: is the moment when organizations understand that they're not next to ecology, but that they're in the middle. That actually all places are in the middle of ecology. There is no such a thing as a place that is outside of ecology. There's also not such a thing as the center of ecology. It's everywhere. So you're in the middle of it. And this also makes it your concern, and also potentially a sphere in which you can act, in which you can develop agency. So the moment when you then actually become a Zoöp is the moment that you install a person with a specific function in your organization. And this person, I'll get more into this, of course, can be described as somebody that speaks on behalf of the Zoe. So it's a speaker for the living. So a speaker for the living, there's a technical side, and I'm kind of more there's a technical legal description that's here, but there's also an important set of sources that make you understand what it's actually the role is. I'll go into both a little bit. So the speaker for the living is basically somebody who has the role of advisor or teacher on board of the organization to take this organization along this learning process. Technically, it's a board observer. That means it's not a board member, but it's installed by the board, and it has a vote in decisions, but not a ruling vote, an advisory vote. But if you are a Zoöp, and that means that you sign a contract, and in that contract you say that you work with this vote. So this is not a board member, but it's somebody that has a very strong advisory vote, and as a Zoöp, you commit to working with this vote. This is what you've said in the beginning. This is what you say in the moment. This is what you commit to in the moment by a contract when you become a Zoöp. I'll skip the technical bits a little bit because I'll get back to that in a diagram that I have later. It is very important that you choose the right person to be a speaker for the living. This has to be somebody that is not inside of your organization, because then you get conflicts of interest, or potentially. But it has to be somebody you trust, and it also has to be somebody that and I'll get a little bit later, I'll get to talk about who is we in this case, that we can trust, because we have to collaborate on this. The kind of cultural backgrounds of this role of the speaker for the living are, you could say, at least there are two major sources. One is the way in which I know there are actually, to be honest, well, no, I'll skip that. This is the example. I was going to talk about Ecuador, but actually I'll talk about the Mary Guardians, because they're more clearly the inspirators for the role of the speaker for the living. So in 2018, actually two instances before that already this happened, but in 2018, Wanganui River in New Zealand acquired the status of legal person. This is the first time that the river became a legal person. This is slightly different than the way it's organized in Ecuador, where rights of nature are part of the constitution. In New Zealand, what happened is that various more than human bodies, a mountain, Mount Taranaki, a forest, Te Urewera forest, and also Wanganui River acquired the status of legal person. That means they can defend their own rights in a case of law against trespassers, against mining companies, against toxic dumps, what have you. If the river or the mountain or the park is to defend their rights, they are represented by a human person that is member, that is kind of part of the ecosystem, or in this case, the river or the mountain or the forest. And in New Zealand, these are Maori peoples, Maori iwi as they are known. And the guardian, the person that takes up this role of articulating the needs, the interests of the river, is known as a guardian. And this is somebody who knows the river well, who lives there, who is in a way understands himself as part of this larger river, not just the technical description of the water, but the river as it exists with all its contributaries, with all its species, with all its intricate links and relationships in New Zealand. So this human is fully member of this community that together makes up the river, and as such can speak on behalf of the river. So that's the cultural role, and the other background of the cultural source of the idea of the speaker for the living. And the other background is that of the board observer that I already described. And the board observer is developed as a model that big investment companies sometimes use to protect their interests if they invest in a startup. So there are smaller companies with bright, innovative ideas that need money to start working. Big investment companies are interested in getting these things on the road and then make a profit later on. And they often do this by investing a large sum of money, but then also sending somebody that will make sure that the decisions this startup makes are in the interests of this investor. And this person, a way to organize the role of such a person is that of the board observer that I already described. So in a way, you could say that if you take this as this as the model by which to understand Zoöp, you could say that the living world is considered, is set up as a kind of investor that for the past thousands of years has freely invested in any human endeavor, freely, all the time. And through this board observer now begins to ask for a little bit of return. So again, I said this already, but in practice, the speaker for the living helps the Zoöp to go on a learning trajectory, to follow the learning process of the zoonomic annual cycle. This I'll skip. So, the learning process. Now, the first thing that happens is that when the speaker for the living that speaks on behalf of the interests of other than human life in the decision-making processes that he or she is part of in the Zoöp. The first thing that happens is that all these ecological concerns move from the background to the foreground, and they become the major concerns. And because of that, decision-making processes where these interests, these needs, these concerns, where they are expressed, these decision-making processes change in their quality, and because of that, the whole operation sphere of the Zoöp gradually changes. I can at Het Nieuwe Instituut, we do this. We are Zoöp, the organization that I work in Rotterdam. We organize ourselves according to this model. And one of the first thing that happened is that before that we considered our institution as the building and our programs. And once we were a Zoöp, immediately the ponds and the garden became part of our space. We were no longer just, let's say, the human side of things, but the more than human side of things was suddenly part of our concern. And all our programs started to deal with these things also. And all the needs of more than humans were also part of decision-making about travels, about different kinds of programs, about uses of materials, and about a lot of other things. So I'll now get a little bit into how am I doing for time, by the way. Oh yeah, okay. I'll take another 10 minutes, I think, to talk about the learning process. Basically, the learning process is a yearly cycle, an annual cycle of answering questions on the basis of which you make decisions and to learn from the answers of these questions and to evaluate in winter and to do this process again next year. The first time you do this leads, okay, no, I'll just go through them and you'll understand that there's a difference between the first time you do it and every consecutive time. So there are 5 questions. The first 3, the top 3, are kind of the questions that together make a map of the qualitative relations of your organization. And the second 2 questions are the pragmatics, are what you do then with this qualitative map, how you act in that map. So the first 3 questions are basically the kind of questions that an ecologist asks of a place where he's never been. So what bodies live here? How are their life worlds coming together? Like, what are their relevant experiences? What are they eating? Where do they live? How are they relating to each other? And the third question is a kind of qualitative analysis, and it tries to depict whether these bodies that in your Zoöp, sorry, I'll go back one more time. So these are basic questions that an ecologist asks, but in the case of a Zoöp, these questions are not just asked. In the case of a Zoöp, these questions are not just asked of the more than human life that makes up an ecosystem, but are asked of all bodies that make up a Zoöp. And as a Zoöp also always has a human organization as part of it, because that's how you start a Zoöp. Also the function of the building, the role of cars, of technical systems, of organizational bodies, of finance systems, etc., etc., etc. They become bodies, they become understood as bodies that participate in ecosystems. So this first question kind of equals reality between humans and non-humans. Not that they become equal to each other or similar to each other, but at least it makes them part of the same shared reality, which is not divided along the lines of that's its nature and this is our concern. The second question is the question already described. So how are these bodies kind of perceiving each other? What do they need in terms of food? What do they do with their waste streams? What are their life worlds, basically? The question of von Uexküll, if you're familiar with that. And the third question is this qualitative map. To what extent are these bodies actually supporting each other through either food or habitat or humidity or other qualities of life? Or are these bodies actually in degenerative relations with each other, meaning they limit each other's potential for well-being? They are toxic to each other, or they diminish their living space, or they prevent each other from finding chance at procreations or finding habitats. So with this map, you can see, you can begin to answer the second 2 questions. And one is that, so which are then the major concerns of our organization? In which way is our organization most problematically participating in this ecosystem? What are the most degenerative relations? And then the 5th question is then, and what should we do to transform these ways of relating? What can we do? Where can we intervene to transform one or more of these bundles of toxic relations, of degenerative relations, in order to make them regenerative? What can be done in order to meet the goals that you formulate on basis of your qualitative map? So as a Zoöp, you commit to every year go through this cycle. And the first time gives you the first map. After you've done several things over the course of your year, of course, things change. So you'll have to adjust your map. If things go well, you will have diminished certain degenerative relations and transformed them into regenerative relations. So you'll have to adjust your map, which basically means that you can also start formulating new goals and come up with new interventions. But this is a gradual process. You cannot do everything at once. You have to focus and you have to learn and unravel step by step the processes you're involved in in order to find the ways in which you can intervene and transform them. We found in Het Nieuwe Instituut that interventions tend to come in 3 kinds of flavors. The first one have to do with the first ones are these are the condition on which the other 2 can happen. And this has to do with sensitizing to the needs of other than humans, sensitizing to the possibility of horizontal relations, of mutually supportive relations. between humans among each other, but also between humans and non-humans, and between certain non-humans. And all this can be the concern of a Zoöp. Once that sensitizing is taking hold, then you can begin to reorganize your organization in the way you do things, your spatial arrangement, your contracts, your management practice, etc., which leaves the things you cannot change directly, for which you need to develop strategies, either to protect yourself from your regenerative practices from the influence of external forces, or to find ways to help influence those external forces so that they also get on some kind of regenerative trajectory. This is what I've just said. So these would be my last slides. So this is where we are currently. Het Nieuwe Instituut would be the first Zoöp in the world. We work according to these principles. We are Zoöp for 1 year now. We've done. I have a whole lot of presentation on that, but it really takes me another hour. But I can talk about it. We've done several interesting things. We also found out some things which are extremely hard to change. That will take years. And we also identified for what we need collaborative partners, and which are really complex problems, and certain things that turned out to be way simpler than we maybe feared. At this moment, there are 3 other organizations committed to become Zoöps this year. And next to that, there are actually about 35. I've only pictured 2, but there are about 35 organizations that call themselves proto-Zoöp. So they're in the trajectory to actually become a Zoöp. This is a regenerative farm in the south of the Netherlands. So that's a farm that has as primary goal to sustain life, and a secondary goal to provide food for humans, which is quite an interesting hierarchy, and they're quite effective at it. Actually, I'm supposed to go there tomorrow, because the 2 people who started the farm are going to get married. So that's a farm. The second one is so this is a rural organization. The third one is the Keuvel. That's an urban cooperative of various small companies and living spaces that have set out to clean up a completely toxic waste dump in Amsterdam North, also close to where I live. With the use of various plants, and they have managed to clean it up quite effectively. And they're slowly transforming this place in an old kind of dump for heavy metals and oil. They slowly transform it in a place where life actually thrives fantastically again, and where also humans and companies can thrive together. And the third place is an heritage site, an old fortress, kind of half rural, half urban, which does a lot of community practices. So they have quite different ways of being in the world, and quite different ways to understand their own regenerative goals. And these are the first next Zoöps. And in the year 2024, 7 more Zoöps in different European countries will be started, because we're part of a big European project in which this will happen. And next to that, we hope to realize some more of those 35 organizations that have now committed themselves to becoming Zoöps. So I have a whole set of examples that I can show you if we get to talk about them. But if I really make them part of my presentation, this will take me another 30 minutes. So I think we should stop and start talking, and then we see what of these things are relevant to discuss more. Thank you very much. That's me for now. I hope you could follow this.
Thank you so much, Klaas.
Thank you.
So much stuff, so much experience, a lot of inspiration. I would like to open up. Oh, Lenin has to leave. But I want to open the mic. So if you want to, let's go. I'm not sure. Can I do that?
Yeah, if you go to the list of participants, I think you can.
No, but for you to unshare your
I can
screen,
unshare my-
so we
I
can go
unshare.
back to see each other.
I can unshare
That's
my-
great. Okay.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
Ok, so here we are back. Estamos de volta. Vou voltar pro português e vou convidar todo mundo de perguntar, comentar. Podemos nos dar um minutinho para pensar. Se vocês poderiam usar a mãozinha, aí eu vou ficar de olho para ver vocês, tá? Aí, Abel, tem uma pergunta, Abel.
Hi, sorry, I was a little bit late, so I was not sure how it's work. Like, so I'm presenting myself. I'm a biologist. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. And it's I can ask in English, yes? It's
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay,
Well,
yeah,
me,
because
of course.
no, because I think that there is some kind of translation, but I guess that okay. So like thank you for the institute to organize that. It's was really overwhelming because I'm working with algae. I'm ecologist. So to see this type of presentation in a different way of biology, let's say, it's really inspiring me. And
Thank
I'm
you.
working with microalgae and also big algae as a regenerative tool, let's say. So in first as a comment, I was feeling like, wow, I'm doing that. What's going on? This guy translate everything that I was doing. So this was super nice.
It's
But
great
in the
to
other
hear
hand,
also. Yeah.
I don't know if it's great because I feel that someone like, I mean, like as a biologist, as someone that was in the academy for 22 years, and now I'm trying to develop a business, it's really bad. It's really hard in Brazil. You know, as a business, a young woman in a business world, it's not nice. But as you show how can be done, sounds easy. But I mean, like, so that's I'm going for from the comment first. Thank you. I feel so appreciate that there is something that I was doing without a name, maybe with all this, like I used to call co-creation, maybe all these collaborative things and the perspective of the systematic of agroforest and biology. But my question, from your perspective, I know that Zoöp, as you show, it's 1 year, but it's easier to change something that's already running, or it started from that? I mean, if you understand the question, it is that, like, what's the difference? Like, for example, it started a new business or whatever, how we call a Zoöp from the Zoöp Foundation.
From scratch,
From scratch, or something that's already running and we change for that, you know, adaptation for that.
Two different aspects to it. It is easier to start a Zoöp from scratch because you don't have to change habits that are already ingrained. On the other hand, an organization that already exists has a lot of capacities that you don't have if you start. So let's say to talk about the Nieuwe Instituut, we already had, there was already a garden, there was already a pond, there was already a building that hosted some life, but not so much. And the fact that that was already there made it very easy to transform a few things. And suddenly this garden started to boom, and this pond started to host much more life. And the building is now open to habitation by many more species than it used to. This was easy. This is way more difficult for a startup. On the other hand, it was much more complicated to transform, for instance, the traveling, and it's really not successful at all yet, to transform the traveling behavior of our company, our director, who flies all over the world 3 times per year. Yeah, and this won't happen the coming year. We're talking about it, but yeah, he says, yeah, but this is my job. Of course it is his job, but I mean, so, okay. So, and this is way easier to start, to change if you start.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was.
I can say much more,
so.
but that's
No, thank you.
Let me just jump in because there was a doubt if Klaas, for people who do not speak English and would like to ask in Portuguese, if you technically got the translation from Portuguese to English, you made a remark in the beginning that there was a problem. Can you tell me again what the problem was? Did you not hear anything, or was maybe you did not understand the content of my introduction? What was the problem?
I didn't hear a translation, and also in the subtitles, I think it's trying to transcribe and not translate.
Okay.
So if you say spoken language is Portuguese, it tries to write down in Portuguese what it thinks is being said. So if you speak English, it really makes no sense what it writes down.
Right. We do not need to, you do not use the subtitles. Go to the little ball that has like a globe and choose English. Choose English.
Yep. I've done that.
Okay.
Can you hear me? This is the interpreter. I'm speaking in Portuguese. Yeah.
Finally.
So please, everyone feels comfortable, can feel comfortable to ask in Portuguese. Everything's going to work.
Super.
Now.
Obrigada.
Because he had some difficulties to click on the icon.
I was clicking the wrong button.
Thank you. Yeah, that's okay. So Belle, let's hear other people. Let's see if we have other questions. Who else? If you don't have, I have one. Could you define what is an organization for us to have, to be sure that we have the whole idea of what is an organization? To define in an abstract way, besides the examples, what's an organization?
Yeah. I'll first go to why we talk about organizations, and not about just individuals or networks. The thing is that we want to make this model should be robust. This should make sure that it actually does something. And for this, you need to work on a framework that is capable of producing some kind of accountability. And so an organization, from this perspective, from this idea, an organization is actually a legal person. So anything that is a legal person that has a kind of obligation towards upholding the law, or is an organization that can be held to perform according to the law, is something that can sign the Zoöp contract. And then there's all kinds of flavors of organizations. Some are very flat, some are very hierarchical, some are enormous, and some are really small. All that is possible for a Zoöp. It plays out quite differently in a hierarchical organization than in a very flat organization. But basically, you can always organize this accountability in such a way that this learning process can become effective. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it's very interesting. There is another question from Sarah. Sarah, você quer? Tá me ouvindo? Você tá com a mão.
Sarah, would you like to ask a question? You have your hand. I cannot turn on the volume. Can I do this?
I see questions in the chat as well, by the way.
Eu só posso pedir para você fazer. Você pode botar a pergunta no chat.
You can put she's saying that you suggested to put the question in the chat.
I see a question.
Yes.
Yeah, because you asked about organization. So this is, I was about to ask more things, but I was being shy, but I will enjoy this time if it's possible. Klaas, when you mentioned organization, and I was also considered like by myself, by my, like, let's say, as my status now in Brazil, I can be a juridical person, but I also doing NGO work with like a big networking for popularizing algae, let's say, no profit one. But in Brazil, I am my own organization. So as my business, because the small one, it's like only 2 years, and also as a Isabel, as a person, as an individual. And if I want to sign this contract as an organization doing this multiple task, it is possible. Or because, as you described, because organization is like a system, let's say. So I can put myself in a system that I'm dealing with different partners, for example, in universities.
In the end, Zoop is something extremely pragmatic. It tries to make a difference. So if for your practice, it does not, okay, first I'll give the technical answer. Technical, yes, of course, you can sign the Zoop contract, but the question is, what will it do for you? The way you describe it, you're already doing all these things, and you're in a way you are your own speaker for the living. So what will it do for you? Nothing. So, but so you don't have to go through this learning process also. And what it may help you do, so I'll also try to sell the Zoop idea a little bit better. What it may help you to do, if there would be more Zoops in Portugal, is in Brazil, of course. It would help you, give you a basis for collaboration, because you're following the similar kind of questions and you come up with similar kinds of issues. So this provides a basis for collaboration. That could be a good benefit. A third thing might be that if you become a Zoop and there are other Zoops that you want to that you can identify, that you'll recognize how you can collaborate, not just because you're in the same, but because you're in a kind of chain. For instance, in the Netherlands, we're working, and this is a long far off for it to become real, but we're working on a kind of chain of people in a building that together make up the whole building practice. So in the end, you have architects that make certain kinds of buildings. And you have the people that do the building, the people that provide the materials, the people that grow the materials, the people that turn the growth material in. And if all these organizations are Zoops, then they are each other's preferred collaborators. So these things can be extremely beneficial, helpful. Then you don't have to worry about these things. You know that you work according to the same principles. This is a long far off. This is a long way off. But we are, on the other hand, it's also not realistic. It's, but these could be good reasons. One more thing, I think it's more effective, or it's quite effective in. Sorry, no, I'm not. I'm saying this wrong. This morning I had a conversation with a Belgium organization from Belgium, who's actually a huge network of at least 500 other organizations. And they were worrying like, but we don't have a fixed space. We don't have a direct outside that we can work with. So how can we become a Zoop? It turned out that they do a lot of events. They organize events always at different places. And in how to do events, there's a lot of questions that you can ask about how certain practices can be transformed in regenerative practice. Imagine that you always did something somewhere, and by doing that, you leave the place better than you found it. If this becomes your aim, and there's many different ways in which you could answer this question, this can also be a very interesting way to be. So I'm just giving you a couple of examples. A third one, last one. There's a group of organizations in the Netherlands that want to, not in the Netherlands, actually this is in Portugal, that want to collaborate in forming a Zoop together. That means that they actually will pool their efforts, and together they'll collaborate. They'll work with one speaker for the living, and they make a shared program on which this speaker for the living has then a say. So this is a third way in which so then you're not a Zoop on your own, but you, from the get-go, from the initiative moment, you do this already in a collaboration. You still have to sign your own Zoop contract. You want every party to be accountable, but still, that's the third way you could think about it. Thanks.
Great. Sarah posed the question in the chat. Let me translate it for you. She would like to know how a consulta works.
Consulting?
How the consulting works. She works as a professor, reader at a university in Brazil, and she sees many fantastic things, maybe opportunities within and outside of the university. And she would also be interested in receiving the slides, the PowerPoint that you made, so that she can work with it afterwards.
Yeah, I can send them to you. I will send them to you, Astrid, and then you can share them. In Het Nieuwe Instituut, so the place I work, at the actual Zoöp, first actual Zoöp, but also in several other places, although they're not fully Zoöps. It works like this. In the Nieuwe Instituut, we have, so I have an image of the moment where we actually become a Zoöp. The speaker for the living, who in our case is Maaike van Stiphout. She's a landscape architect. She's our speaker for the living. And she started out with joining some board meetings in order to find the strategy of becoming a Zoöp. Quickly, we found out that the board meetings are not the place where it happens, that she should actually join a project work. So we set up a Zoöp work group. So she's in our place. She's 12 times a year. She is in our institute, and 12 times a year we basically, and she talks with different groups. 12 times a year we prepare a presentation, or we make her a part of the agenda, and there are several projects to discuss, and she gives us advice on how to do these things. And we propose things, and she says, well, better not do this, or look at this, or ask this person. So basically, and we can always, her job is always not, her concern is not whether this or that becomes a beautiful exhibition or a beautiful lecture series. Her concern is that whatever you do, these interests of other human life are taken into account. So because she's independent of us, she can give this as a very straightforward advices. And then because we're a Zoöp, we committed to work with these advices. That's not the same as saying we have to follow everything she says, but we are committed to do it as best as we can. And it's legitimate to do it differently. And as she is also not somebody who just puts down a dictate. So in the end, it's a very, how to call it, a very political situation. We have to find out what works best for everybody. But she will always, in this process of finding out what's best for everybody, she will always stick to this position of talking on behalf of the way we participate in ecosystems, the other than humans that are part of our ecosystems. And some things are surprisingly easy, like again, these ponds and gardens, and actually the whole education department has embraced Zoöp very easily, and it's part of everything they're doing right now. So it's also very attractive for audiences, it turns out. And other things, as I said, are much more difficult. But yeah.
I
saw a question from Lucia also earlier in the chat.
Yeah.
It says, is there a Zoöp here in London? Is there something specific for schools?
Great.
There is no real Zoöp in London, but there is a company in the UK that made nature part of their board. As you probably will understand, I have a little bit problem with the idea of the word nature, as though it's a separate entity. Also, the process, so yes, nature is part of the board, but what is the role of nature in the board is not very defined. So I don't know, to be honest, I don't know a lot of details about it. It looks a little bit like Zoöp, but I think in effect it's also quite different. And I have to really know much more about the mandate of this person and who takes up this role also, and why this person can speak on behalf of nature in general, wherever it is. This I don't know much about. So there is no real Zoöp in London. There are in the Netherlands, however, several organizations that are schools that want to become Zoöps. It's not there's no specific model of the Zoöp for the school. Any organization can adopt it, but then they have to find out how to apply it in their own work. So how to apply it in their curriculum, but also maybe in the way the building and all the other things. There's a secondary school in the Netherlands that's working on this at this moment. There's also an art academy and a university college. No primary school yet. I would love a primary school as well.
While listening to you talking about the consultant, I all of a sudden realized that we often are being presented with consultants.
Yeah,
and some that we never invited because it's people who question us.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I will give you an example. When we were in the last year's residence program, we had mentors and they would give feedback to the resident artists. And one question to a foreign artist was, what do you live here? You come here from Europe, you do your research, and then you go back. What do you live here? Is this, are we your resource? Is this here your...
Yeah.
And then...
Are you tapping your... Yeah.
What is the relationship?
Legitimate
We
question.
establish it.
Yeah.
And when I heard you speak about the consultant within the Het Nieuwe Instituut, I was just like, oh, that was a similar situation because she really changed.
Sorry, can I stop you for a second? Because the speaker for the living, I would not call them a consultant. They're a teacher. They're a teacher. So the word consultant came up because I recognized it in somebody's text. But we don't call the speaker for the living a consultant. It's somebody that really, the teacher is a much better word. Technically, they give advice, but they give advice in such a way that it allows the organization to learn. And it takes the organization along this course of this learning process. Yeah. That
was certainly also the intention of the mentor in that moment. But what happens since we are in dialogue amongst humans in a quite political situation, the issue that was raised is also the issue of racism and of colonialism, because we live in and if I reframe it and interpret it, that was actually a speaker for the living, because it helps me right now to think things together which is actually one of the intentions of Cidade Floresta, to think agendas together that often are separated, like racism and environmental questions, because and then also to go beyond the sustainable model and actually asking what are you contributing to a degraded situation, and emotionally, affectively, psychically is a degraded situation. I mean, centuries of colonialism and racism have left this situation. So it actually needs a regenerative effort, or at least some kind of attention and sensibility towards acting in this context. And it super helped me now to rethink these moments and maybe reframe also situations of mentoring that are actually involving situations of authority and of projection sometimes, and we're complex subjects. This I found it very interesting because you were actually giving us examples about how an external person, it needs to be an external person, there needs to be some kind of independence, can actually speak in favor of the living. And then the living also includes us, our well-being in a way. So anyway, as a cultural institution, that is what we already investing in the immaterial parts of life. So that helped me. I found that very interesting.
Yeah, there's, if I can give one comment, what is it's very, this is not easy, but it's what turns out to be very important is that to realize that all bodies can have very different relationships at the simultaneous relationship with different qualities. that some relationships between some bodies can be regenerative, while other relationships between the same bodies are not regenerative. So regenerative is a relationship that sustains both bodies in these relationships. And degenerative are relationships that support one and diminish the other. And the fact that this can be simultaneously true is in a way totally obvious, but it often gets overlooked or confused in this, and certainly in political discussions where power is a part. So yeah, so this is a general remark, but the way you said that these agendas are always simultaneously part. I mean, they're completely, it's a bit of an overused word, but completely entangled, obviously. The idea that these practices are separate from each other, of course, yeah, I mean, in a way, this is what the ecological mindset does immediately, that all these relationships become simultaneously part of the same reality, rather than I can look at this way and then compartmentalize and then look at that, and then in the weekend I do this, and then Monday I go back to that, and then in the afternoon I'm at home and I'm the family man, and in the weekends I'm a sportsman, and all these things have nothing to do with each other. Sorry, this is maybe a bit of a crude example, but the ecological mindset conflates or makes all these perspectives immediately part of the same reality. Then it becomes complex. And then, okay, one last thing. I think here is where particularly the cultural sensibility comes in handy as the kind of the skill set that is able to deal with complexity. Okay, where our sciences and most of our, let's say, scientific world knowledge practices have a hard time with complexity. If things become complex, and we don't really know how to work with them. So, but this is the field where arts and culture actually sit. So the skill set of artists and cultures are suitable in the ecological context. Are at there, and then you can work with specific scientific facts and numbers, but you don't lose track of the idea that basically reality is inherently complex. That doesn't mean it necessarily complicated. It's just always many things at the same time, and this is how it is. That's how we live. Yeah.
Isabel?
Hi, hello, Klaas. I'm Isabel. Sou diretora do Instituto Goethe aqui no Rio de Janeiro.
I'm the director of Goethe Institute in Rio de Janeiro. I'm going to talk in Portuguese. I have a very pragmatic question. How this teacher of the living, this is connected to the organization. And in the economic level, what's this relationship? How does it work? How many times this person is close to the organization, in which ways? So what's the routine and how does it work?
Thank you. I skipped that little bit in the presentation. I had a slide over about it, but I didn't talk about it. Actually, the Zoöp configuration consists of, so this is the we that I didn't talk about. The we in this case would be, there's a Zoonômic Institute, that's me and my direct colleagues, and we are the people that help organizations to become Zoöps. Next to us, there's another this is a foundation. Next to us, there's another foundation, and this one is called the Zoonômic Foundation. This is independent from us, and the Zoonômic Foundation acts towards the Zoonômic Institute as a speaker for the living acts towards the Zoöp. It is also the Zoonômic Foundation that formally is the body that assigns a speaker for the living. So that means that in all ways, this speaker for the living is not appointed by the organization, but is appointed by one foundation that has only one task, and the task is to represent the voices of other than human life within Zoöps. This is the body that assigns a speaker for the living that can then take up the role in a Zoöp if the Zoöp wants this to work with this particular speaker for the living. Economically, it works like this. A Zoöp so this is how we call it, contributes to, pays a yearly contribution to the Zoonômic Institute, that's us, from which we put our money into the Zoonômic Foundation, and they pay the speaker for the living. So there we also created this independence. There's no direct money flow between the Zoöp and the Speaker for the Living. And it goes through the Zoonômic Institute, and we are the body that basically we give trainings. We do all kinds of things with this money. We make money in other ways as well. We don't depend fully on Zoöps. This would be this would not be realistic. Well, yeah. Does it answer your question? Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just another and then you kind of like in the circle of the year, you decide at some point to do a strategy, for example, so that Speaker for the Living can then analyze or like talk with you about how to do it, or is it like regularly and you consult and have meetings or discuss it regularly? How does that function?
Yeah, that's in a way, so there's a minimum requirement. We say the Speaker for the Living has to be part of it minimally 4 board meetings a year. And there's a couple of other, you have to make a plan and you have to perform this plan. This is all public. You make this public. So that's also a mechanism to create more accountability. In fact, it works quite differently in different organizations. In the Nieuwe Instituut, Maaike van Stiphout is with us 12 times a year in meetings, but she also, she's readily available for all kinds of advice online, and we call, and sometimes we talk with her 3 or 4 times a week, and sometimes weeks go by, nobody has contact. You can also think of, for instance, this is actually a bit in answer to the question of Bel, Bel Portugal is. I don't know if this is your real name, but
sorry, it's Isabel. Yes,
Isabel,
I tried to
yes,
change, but I didn't manage here.
Isabel.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thanks.
Technical problem.
If you start an organization, if it's very much in development phase, there's a lot of work. So then, the Speaker for the Living would be involved in on a much more intense basis. And all this is possible. We don't dictate this. We only say there's a minimum, but there's no real maximum. One more thing. I think this was in response to the question of Sarah, but I think somebody said you make, or was it Astrid who said this, that it sounds easy. So that's maybe the effect of a presentation that has gone a little bit too polished. In fact, certain things are quite easy. It turns out that the mentality of the workers of Het Nieuwe Instituut was very ready for the Zoöp model. And they changed, in a couple of weeks, they changed their attitude. But certain habits are extremely hard to change. And it's very hard to find the right point of intervention. You can say, well, we make a rule that we can no longer fly beyond, if it's under 1,000 kilometers. Yeah, and then what do you do if you do? Or if there's no time, or so a rule is not enough. So where do you need to intervene? The rule, it helps, but it's not enough. Or reuse of building exhibition materials. Yeah, but if we really have a very different exhibition next time, and they have and we work with new designers who are really, we want to give them some freedom as well. This is one of our jobs, and we want to give new designers also a way to learn the trade, and this is one of the ways we do things. So can we always confront them with the leftover stuff of the previous exhibitions? So where do you intervene? And these things are very gradual. So every time you learn something and you say, okay, this works, maybe we need to find a shared storing space with a lot of institutions in Rotterdam. We're already talking about that. Where we have a massive pool of stuff that many people can use. This could be very handy. But all these things are in development. So I resist. It's fantastic that it sounds easy. The idea is that it's a low threshold to begin. But if you do it, you'll find all kinds of things that you realize you work on this for years. But because you signed the contract and because you already started, the commitment is extremely high. So, and that's very good to see that, there's no giving up. So no, we actually, then we make small progress instead of big progress. Also good.
We have two more hands raised of
Okay.
Belle and Isabel. I don't know which one was first.
I would just very quickly comment on that, because we had also this commitment, and I worked before in the Goethe Institute in Finland, and we had a commitment on not taking a flight within Finland. But it meant at some point for some colleagues that they would then actually not spend the weekend with the family and their children, to be in the train all night. So it's exactly where it comes like, okay, what do we do now? And so I absolutely see that it's not very easy. I was kind of listening to you. I was thinking about these challenges, and also for an institution, for example, we did this kind of a sustainability commitment. I think it's what it's called in Finland. And we had this external advisor, and then we committed to some things. And then we have also, of course, a certificate, which an institution like the Goethe Institute loves, of course. So I'm always thinking like how to, on one hand, do things, and also kind of try to have like this criteria that are also that you can communicate easily within, like into the institution, also like also inside. And also make it visible, because it has an impact for the institution. And on the other hand, deal with this complexity and with the controversy of not being able to follow it like strictly, and that being also okay, actually. That's kind of the challenge that I'm always dealing, I feel.
Yeah, I recognize it totally. And we found that this, to go back to the idea of regeneration, is helpful, but usually not immediately. So if you go back to your example of the family, of the person that could not be with their family, here are two different, let's say, dimensions of regeneration are at stake, and one is not necessarily better than the other. So yes, we put CO2 in the atmosphere by taking an aeroplane, less so by taking the train. But social regeneration is also part of this picture. So yeah, what is it? I mean, is CO2 more important than healthy family bonds? It's not easy to answer that question, but this is a very productive conversation to have. So the fact that you realize that both these things are important is extremely, I would say, valuable. And then, yeah, you have to. So in a way, you can always work from principles, but there's never dogma. And yeah, dogma again is not. Yeah, it's extremely. We have to be extremely pragmatic, but be very kind of motivated to make the best possible choice. So that's them. But what I like, if I can say that, what I personally like very much about the Zoöp project is that it organizes the forces exactly towards this, towards being pragmatic, but also to be very intrinsically motivated. And it keeps you on track with your motivation, but it also allows you to do things differently than you thought you had to do them at first. So these two things kind of work towards each other rather than against each other. It's very good to find that this actually is true, because this is what we hoped when we designed it, but it's how it plays out so far.
Belle.
Yeah.
Oh, after this discussion about flights, it's also catch me under a position that I used to live in the Middle East, and I live in Europe now, like for several years, more than 15 years. And back in Brazil, I'm trying to count every time my carbon footprint, because I have this overseas flight that, and in the end, I was in a spiral now, like thinking about like how hard it is. It's really hard. But I want to go to another point. Maybe it's something that you not consider as a Zoöp, but it's something that catch me a lot, because for the last 8 years, I was doing hybrid or remote work, doing my postdoc and trying to work overseas and trying to be more hybrid. Unfortunately, we had the COVID that helps in a way that people can do more of this work, but also we started to thinking about all these like the internet, called the IoT trash. So like, for example, right now, we are sitting here in an online, and we can share like knowledge and a lot of, let's say, power between us. And also we are spending a little bit of electricity for the computer and also to database and all this. And we must start to thinking about all this email trashing and all this sustainable part, what they call the internet sustainable. And in Zoöp, you already talk about that, or it's something that's, because it's also part of the regenerative things if you're thinking about hybrid consortium or work way.
Yeah, no, in the catchphrase in the Zoöp practice is perma-computing.
Wow. Okay.
Nice one, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, from permaculture, I guess. Yes.
Permaculture,
Okay.
and then
Good.
perma-computing. So it's the term is devised by a Finnish hacker who was actually part of the demo scene. I don't know if you heard of the demo scene. Yeah. Basically, the demo scene is about to do as much as you can with the limited amount of CPU and material and energy. It's kind of to squeeze the most you can out of a computer. So making a 1.5 hour animation movie on a 5 kilobyte chip. So how can you do that? Yeah. But so there's a whole group of people in the Netherlands, but also in different other worlds that are, so perma-computing, the rough definition is, or the rough motto, the adagium, the starting point is like, we can only justify computing if it can actually contribute to ecological regeneration. And then the question is, but how? So it has to do with not only with the material and energy needs of computing, it also has to do with the particular processes, like to what ends are we using computing? It also has to do with the kind of worldviews that are embedded or encoded into computing, and whether quantified knowledge is the only type of knowledge that you can work with. Are there other ways in which computing might help into understanding more relational realities, the kind of ecological reality? So all these things are kind of branches of the question of perma-computing. But it becomes, I'm trying to actually promote that Het Nieuwe Instituut also develops a program around perma-computing, and to develop a kind of working principles by which you can judge your own computational activities, and to a bit similar that we do with our travel practice. Like, so when can we justifiably say we're working towards a perma-computational practice?
Right. That would connect
to
a
couple of
question.
very nice URLs on this. I can share them with you also.
Like when you said you talked about degrowth or degrow, you said I could talk more about that, but maybe we can do that later. Maybe that would connect well to this moment when you said about this mini chip. And so maybe you can elaborate a bit how a degrow or post-growth could look like if it's not a future of death, basically.
Yeah. The degrowth is a kind of a container concept for a whole lot of practices that share as reality, as a realization that the economic growth is actually the death of the planet. If we continue on, and certainly the industrialized country, if they continue to have economies that are addicted to growth, this is how it is right now, and we're accelerating rapidly in a completely unlivable, at least an unlivable planet for humans, at least, and let's say higher vertebra. So degrowth is the alternative, and it's a combination of, you could say, decolonial strategies, eco-feminist practices, eco-social practices, commoning, very important, and it's basically a set of tactics and strategies to uncouple economies from the addiction to growth. So another way to call it is, so it's not economic shrink, it's not economic crisis, or all these are capitalist terms. It's something that's other than capitalist. It's, yes, we need economy, of course. Economy is just part of reality. It's not the problem itself, it's the way we do economy. And degrowth is then comes down to a set of practices that in a planned way reconstruct the economy. So it favors public expander over private. It diminishes the role of private rights holder in a certain essential factors. So in care, in housing, and a couple of other sectors of economy, private property would become less important than it now is. It would favor ecological restoration and a couple of other things. It adjusts its tax system so that reuse becomes cheaper than new stuff. There's a whole lot, an enormous amount of different possible things that you can do. And yeah, degrowth is kind of the container concept to describe all these practices. There's a lively debate about it. Actually, even in the Netherlands, there was a conference in the parliament. It was a little bit hush-hush, like that people didn't want to let it be known that we're actually thinking about something as rude and ludicrous as degrowth. But it actually happened. I don't think a lot of politicians are sold to the idea. They also think it politically this will not work. How can we tell anybody that we want degrowth? Well, we've only mentioned growth so far, like is the only rule there is. But still, it's a growing movement that is really gaining a lot of traction, also at the EU level. So again, this is very European perspective. But let's say doing a Zoöp fits very well with the degrowth set of values and practices. In a way, Zoöp could be one way to contribute to degrowth, put it that way, yeah. But degrowth is very much a macroeconomic scheme. And Zoöp is very much local and situated. It's something that you can do. Degrowth is not something we can do. This is the emergent effect of a whole lot of different things.
And why I was always wondering about the degrowth discourse is, or what's I don't like so much about it, is that a Zoöp is actually a very complex process. So you would grow, but you would grow in complexity, whereas many of economic processes today, they're simplifying in a very violent way. And so it maybe it's utopian, but it would also include maybe that we need to calculate in a different way. And then there would be growth. So in the Cidade Floresta, that was always the idea. I mean, a forest is always growing, and it is highly competitive and everything. It's nothing pacified at all. It is not closed. It's always an open system, open for change. But it is not an economic, it is not degenerating. It is always collaborative enough to sustain life on that level of complexity. So the question is maybe, there is it reaches a level and then it does not need grow anymore.
No, it can still. Actually, funny enough, peak ecosystems have usually less species than diverse than kind of partly. Well, yeah, the ecologist is nodding. If you let Holland, our country, my country, if you leave it alone, it turns into two kinds of forests: beech forest and what's known as bog forest or broekbos, and both are not very specifically. Beech forest is actually quite a poor ecosystem. But if there's open spaces in the forest, then suddenly a whole lot of biodiversity happens.
I can give you an example that can be good for what you say, Klaus. For example, Amazonia is much less diverse. I'm not sure who from here the room. It's in Rio. In Rio, we have another biome, like a forest that is really diverse. And people always like, yeah, I was working in Amazonia for the last 2 years, and there it's really like the soil is a sand, like a beach, and the diversity is much less than Mata Atlântica, the one that we have here in Rio. So when you understand, like also when you go to the beach and you see all the rocks full of like algae and bivalves and other organisms, they compete for this little space between water and sun. So when you take the system, the ecological system, to understand that, it's much easier and to explain. But like if people, I think like it's also about power. They like to push some power in some areas for saying that's more important, and all this competition is unbalanced. And we have this competition, let's say, balance in the ecological system.
Yeah. To go back to your simplicity remark, Astrid, the growth of economic growth is always growth in gross national product. It's one number that basically joins all economic activity, whether it's about have medical activity around COVID or arms dealing or drugs dealing, whatever, it doesn't matter. Anything that's economic activity is piled in one big heap. Together, this makes gross national product, and this has to grow. That's economic growth. So it's an extremely simplified idea. So where indeed the growth in complexity or the growth in a number of species participating, or the growth in complexity times biomass times species that are participating, then we're talking about very different kinds of growth. And usually, I mean, there's no single entity that can continue to grow. That is just not a possibility. So also economies cannot continue to grow. This is just, this is Kate Raworth. It's just, you can actually with primary school mathematics, you can pretty much count how much growth is possible. And then, at some point it has to be done. But this is not entering it's not entering the practices of economies. Actually, a lot of economic thinkers know this, but it's just, but we don't know how to do it in any other way. So we just have to continue down this road. You cannot even get a loan if you're not promising that your company will grow. You cannot, nobody will give you a loan. So, here's the entrepreneur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we can use the moment, because many people already had to leave earlier, but we would really like to take a picture. So if it's possible and you would like to, please open your camera so we can take a picture. Por favor, a gente gostaria de tirar uma foto.
We would like to have a picture.
So if you would like to,
Tem uma pergunta de Valdir.
There's a question here in the chat. Okay. We will have a photo, and then we will go to Valmeri Ribeiro's question.
Yes. So, Renata, no, we're not there yet. Let's take the picture. We would just use it internally, actually, in the Goethe world. So don't worry that you will appear, go viral on Instagram. And
thank you a lot. It's done.
Now, Valmeri has a problem with her connection, but she would like to know more about the idea about intervening, sensitizing, organizing, and strategies. How do you do that? She's interested in methodologies, especially about sensitizing.
There's okay, I'll give you sorry, I'm wondering where to start. I had one impulse to share with you a book I read over the holidays, the book by which I found fantastic on the level of talking about how sensitizing actually works. It's the book by Baptiste Morisot. Morisot, not Morris. Sorry, I'm trying to correct the auto transcribe, but the book is called On the Animal Trail. It actually talks about tracking, how tracking animals is the primary attitude of sensitizing to the living world. And it's basically, it's a fantastic philosophical book. It really connects the emergence of what is particularly about humans to the practice of tracking. Because there are two things come together there. One is the ability to imagine how another body works by getting very different little traces of existence, like an animal paw, a little tuft of hair, maybe a smell or a puddle. These completely different heterogeneous little signs in the mind of a human can come to allow a human to evoke the actual body of for instance, a panther that was somewhere. And it seems that these two things, so one, to use the different signs and to use them to combine, to reason and to look at what came before and what comes after, and to slowly build up an image of how these signs combine. That's a particular human capacity that other animals seem to have little. less so. To some extent, yes, but less so than humans. And the second thing is this power of evocation. So the idea that you can actually call in your imagination an actual panther that was there at some moment and that actually moved through this little gully and then moved left, then stopped there and then smelled this and then moved off in that direction, that you can imagine this for yourself. This seems to be also a particular human capacity. And these probably the need to develop these capacities has to do with the fact that humans moved from tree-dwelling species to the savanna-dwelling species and became hunters. So they had to develop this capacity to track, and they were not being particularly powerful. They had the tactics became to develop the capacity to pursue for very long times. This is also why we don't have hair, so that we can sweat and don't become so hot. And this allowed humans to track animals for a very long time, coupled with his ability to imagine another being at a certain place in a certain way. So basically, this is the sensitized capacity to be able to look at the world and to imagine the way other beings are there. And this goes not just for panthers, of course, this goes for plants and earthworms and nematodes and badgers and squirrels and what have you. This ability is, in a way, the sensitized ability. And that you are part of an ecosystem, that you exist in it, so that you are also in certain, this is actually this idea that human didn't want to be eaten, this I got also from Baptiste Morisot. This funny movement, this fundamental metaphysical movement that humans stepped outside of ecosystems by saying we refuse to be food. That's the moment that they invented nature. That's the place in which you would be food. So nature is the other world. In the world of humans, we are no longer food. We are the top predator. We are the only one that can treat everything else as food, and nothing can treat us as food. So this is the kind of metaphysical movement, and this has to be proven time and again. This is also why this fundamental fear of wolves and other species that potentially treat humans as food. And this is the primal fear of wolves. This is, I mean, if you would be living in an ecosystem and sharing space with wolves, you wouldn't have this primal fear. You'd be careful, but it would not be it would not hurt your humanness. And right now it touches on very fundamental identity problems of humans to be able to share space with wolves. This is a big debate in Europe also. Sorry, I'm kind of trying to haphazardly summarize Baptiste Morisot. It's a fantastic book. It's beautifully written, very lyrical, not very thick also. It's not an academic. It's not an academic text, but it's a very academic thinker. But it's he really teaches, what I also really like about him is that he does philosophy not as coming up with models, but actually thinking through practice. Practice is what leads his philosophy. So I think this is also, I find this very stimulating also for Zoöp. But in practice, what do we do at Het Nieuwe Instituut? For instance, we did a photography workshop with Patricia de Ruiter, in which he uses a lot of yoga techniques. So a lot of meditative techniques. So you're only allowed to make pictures after a series of meditations. And then basically, so after being quiet and having your eyes shut and breathing techniques, certain things. And then the first thing you do is you look at the little piece of ground immediately in front of you, this little 1 foot by 1 foot. And this then explodes into, this always happens, that it turns out that there are an enormous amount of things that happen there that you never notice if you just didn't become quiet enough to realize them. And the fact that this happens, and this happens to everybody, and then you make a picture, but you wait very long with actually making a picture. You wait till what you are looking at actually, you feel that it talks to you. You're not just snapping away an image, but you're establishing contact through your camera, and then you make a picture. And then it is true that these pictures look quite, they always look quite intense. Somehow they capture something, which is, so that's one instance. But also really very much what Maaike van Stiphout often does is just basically walk around the building with a group of people and then talking about the way an oyster catcher would look at this building. So what is an interesting place for an oyster catcher? It's a type of bird that is a bit rare, but not uncommon in European cities. Or the swift or other types of swallows. So look at this little ledger there. They would find this very interesting. This and this and this is not so interesting, but that place is very nice. And then we look, and indeed, it turns out that there are swifts there. So basically demonstrating that it's not impossible to imagine how it is to be another body and to realize, in a way, this is tracking. This is the same thing as Baptiste Morisot does. She does it in a different way, but yeah, I hope that gives a couple of examples. These are a little bit anecdotal, but what we found is that this experience of being sensitized, and this is not an absolute white or black, it's a gradual process, and it happens time and again, of course. But the fact that you realize that you can have, there's a basis of empathy with other bodies, that all bodies need a place to live, they need something to eat, they prefer a chance at procreation, they would like to have choice with all the above. And this is actually quite similar between humans and other bodies. That this experience becomes something that is no longer a profound insight, but actually moves to the background. And it's just, yeah, that's of course how it is. In a way, you could say that this is also, this describes a situation in which you're sufficiently sensitized to do the organizational work. That you find enough solidarity and empathy to be able to say, we can maybe we can take a little bit better care of the bats and of this trees and that tree. And if we do this like this, then they can have that and then that. And this becomes that this is not, let's say, an act of charity, but kind of an act of decency. It is not, okay, look at us doing good, but it's more like, yeah, of course you do it. Yeah, we have to run this place together. Yeah. So it's actually a little bit, it's not an epiphany, maybe it is an epiphany moment, sometimes it is, but it's actually the moment after. It's when this is no longer an epiphany, if it becomes reality, becomes, of course it's like that, yeah.
Great. We have 7 more minutes if we want to. If we are satisfied, we can also say goodnight to Klaas because it's already late and dark. Not that late, actually. Today we started early. It's 9 o'clock.
No, it's fine.
And
I'm not going to bed yet.
Klaas, if you don't mind to write down only the name of the photographer, that would be nice because
her name is in the slides also.
But the slide will be given. Okay, sorry, I didn't get it.
Including a set in the end. I also didn't show that, but there's a last slide with a set of sources, and these are all books, of including a section on degrowth, but also a section on other than human subjectivities. So, and Baptiste Morisot is in there, and a couple of others, well, 5 different chapters. But you'll see them. If you're into reading, if you like reading, this is a nice collection of sources.
Great. So I thank all of you for participating. I thank Klaas for taking the time and sharing his experiences and his knowledge with us. Of course, we thank the Consulate of Holland very much that supported us in this year's program, and also made it possible that we actually invite Klaas. And we also obviously thank the French-German Cultural Fund that funded our program this year also. And thank all of you. I will take the freedom to keep on informing you about our activities. If you do not want that, please let me know. But I would be very happy to stay in touch, and so you will hear from me. And that's it from my part.
Yeah. I want to thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot. Also your questions, I think was funny enough, across half the planet, it still feels like we are making some kind of connection that is meaningful. So I'm happy with that. Thank you very much.
Very much so. Thank you, Isa and Erminia, for the translation.
Yes,
and
also
a good afternoon too.
Thank you very much for that.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Ciao, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.